Good afternoon, Council, members of the public, staff. May I have a mover and seconder to call the meeting to order, please? Councillors Fisher and, Alexander. That the special meeting of the Council of the Township of Springwater of May 3rd come to order at 3:01 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried. Councillor, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? And seeing none, this special meeting of council is called by petition. There are no formal resolutions or agenda items, so I will turn to the petitioning members for the first item for discussion, which is the Rainbow Crosswalk. Deputy Cabral.
Thank you very much, Mayor Coughlin. I guess where I'd like to start off is at the delegation from last year, because the Rainbow Sidewalk or Rainbow Crosswalk was actually delegated to Council in 2022, back in May, and a resolution and staff report, or a staff report, came before Council at an August meeting, and there was a motion made at the August meeting, which not only it basically approved the Rainbow Sidewalk, and it was approved on based on a report by staff at the time that was presented to Council, and a motion to approve the Rainbow Sidewalk going forward was made with a partnership in place respecting 50%. 50% for township taxpayers and 50% for those that were proposing to put the sidewalk in place. So for me, the issue of the sidewalk approval, I supported it back then, I support it now. The issue that I have is more in the fashion with the sidewalk came before Council again this year. And it was the process that I think is faulty. The motion was quite clear, and the issue as a councillor for me is it's an emotional topic. But to me, it's still something that Council as a whole has an obligation to follow the motions and directions that Council puts in place. They're basically marching orders to staff to put what Council as a whole decides should happen going forward. And that's what happened back in August. Since that time, I've received absolutely no further information with respect to the Rainbow Sidewalk. So the problem lay with the fact that no further information was brought forward to Council. Yet certain things were happening, I suspect, in the background that were bringing not the motion back before Council, but the installation of the sidewalk without knowing, or at least I had no idea, whether or not any obligations had been met. It's no different than the partnership that we had with the food bank. We had a partnership with the food bank. They had certain obligations, and they met those obligations. So I don't know whether or not it's a matter of what the motion read back in August, where there was a specific amount of money that staff indicated to Council at that time. Here's the anticipated costs. And then somehow as things transpire, rather than come back before Council and provide further report that indicated a new amount could be put towards the Rainbow Sidewalk or Rainbow Crosswalk to make it happen, that didn't happen. So, sorry folks, in my mind, the original motion was still on the table. It was still the marching orders. I had no other information that a different amount had been arrived at. And I think that in my mind too, I have to also admit that I have an obligation to follow the rules that come out of this particular council, last year and this year. So when the delegation came before Council again, yes, I had some concerns because what was being presented was not what had been proposed in August. And that's the problem I have is not with the rainbow sidewalk, ladies and gentlemen, but with the process by which it was presented to council, and seemingly things were moving in a direction to simply make it happen. We went from $7,000 to $9,000 to, at the meeting, anywhere from $3,000 to $4,000, and then eventually at the end, it was down to $2,200. And the remark I made at that time is, if we were in a position to provide the rainbow crosswalk as we had agreed to through the original motion back in August for $2,200, I think is roughly the amount, then I think staff had an obligation to come before this council and make a presentation to say, hey, we have a revised number. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. And that is the cause of why we're sitting here today, right now. And I'll also let it be known that I made inquiries about that particular delegation to find out what was going on. And at no time was I informed that there'd been a reduction in the amount that staff had assumed would be required to put that installation in place. I'll also state further that I shared that motion from last August with all the other members of council. So unless other members of council had some information that I wasn't privy to, I was actually surprised that there was only a couple of members that actually spoke out about it. I also at that meeting realized that there were some members of councils that seemed to have some background information with respect to how the sidewalk came around and came about, yet neither of those members of council spoke up about it. I had a conversation with our mayor before the meeting. I didn't reach out to her. Actually, I did. I reached out to her regarding the Simcoe Museum on a county matter. The call that I got back was in respect of the delegation coming before council. And what I got was not what I expected. And I still didn't get a straight answer at that time. So I'm placed in a very precarious position, folks. As much as I support the rainbow sidewalk, it also tends to erode my obligations to this chair and making sure that I actually do represent everybody that's concerned. So those are just my opening remarks. I do have some questions coming forward, but I'll open up the floor to anybody else.
Thank you, Deputy Cabral. Councillor Fisher?
I agree with Deputy Mayor Cabral. There was very little transparency coming into the last meeting in regards to this issue. I was never quite sure why we were receiving the $1,000, and I asked for clarity multiple times. Originally, it was $7,000 to $9,000. Mr. Schmidt confirmed that he thought it was between $3,000 and $4,000 during the meeting, and eventually we came to a number around $2,000. And I will say it seemed to me during that meeting that some members of council had prior knowledge as to where that number would end up, where the rest of us had no idea.
Councillor Alexander?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So I have two serious concerns with this item. And again, it is not about the Rainbow Crosswalk. I think it is a great initiative. I think the students did an amazing job fundraising. It is, again, back to the process of how this came about last meeting. First of all, so I'm not sure if this question would go to CAO Schmidt or General GM Ramdale. I would like to understand what the township's process is when a staff report comes back from a delegation. The terms have been changed. So who is responsible for advising the delegation of the new terms? Last term, council voted to increase the contribution from the student group from $1,000 to 50% of the total cost. My understanding is that Mr. Davidson was never officially made aware of this. So that might be incorrect. That's what I was told. So I need to understand if the parameters change, who is responsible for letting that delegation know?
CAO Schmidt?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Councillor Alexander. I will start, and then I may defer to GM Ramdale, as he has had, I guess, more intimate conversations with EDHS on this matter. So I'm going to say something that likely most council or some council members are likely going to disagree with me, but I'll say it anyways. In the motion, the direction was that a 50% funding agreement be requested. The request was made. EDHS stated that they could only fundraise $1,000. Township Council, in that same motion, approved funding up to an amount of $9,000 to undertake this project, as well as the sidewalk at the administration center. So with all due respect, the direction was provided to staff. This project could have already been completed.
Follow on, Councillor Alexander.
Okay, thank you. And I was not a part of council last term, so I can't specifically speak to that. I do feel like it is a bit of backpedaling on semantics. I feel like staff would have known council's what the want was there. We often run our motions by Clerk Ainsworth, and she writes them on the fly. I think she does a very good job of them. So I feel like potentially this is just a bit of backpedaling semantics, but I'm just looking in because I was not a part of it last term. I just want to make one other comment, and then I will let someone else take the floor. My other issue with this is, again, as Deputy Cabral spoke to, why council was not made aware of the significant decrease in the cost of the project prior to the check presentation from delegation. As Deputy Mayor Cabral stated, he did ask for the original motions to be pulled in an email to all of council prior to the meeting. At the very least, the new cost could have been presented to us at that point. By not having the full information, I feel that Deputy Mayor Cabral was put in a position where he had to ask difficult questions that could be perceived that he was not supportive of the project. He was put in an incredibly unfair position because council was not provided with fulsome information, and he was simply trying to do his job.
Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I'm going to speak to the word request because it would be improper to use the word demand or require. So I don't believe that that's a case in point at all, with all due respect to CAO Schmidt. I would hazard a guess to say that the partnership with the Elmvale District Food Bank also contained the word request. And the reason why the word request would be used is because there's no obligation on EDHS or the students from there to agree to what was proposed in that motion by council back in August. They wouldn't be able to use the word, we demand that you pay 50% or we require you to pay 50%. The only word that would fit appropriately is the word request. Then it would be up to them to either accept or reject. Okay. I also want to just make mention too that this did come back in August post-election, and I did have some involvement with the original motion again, and didn't hear back about it. The other thing I'd like to point out is there were ways to make this happen, even outside of coming to a council meeting where the first number that was tossed out was between $3,000 and $4,000. And then later on, as the meeting kind of meandered back and forth, somehow it managed to be dropped down to roughly $2,200. But it could have easily been managed by staff, either preparing a report and coming before council, and then we would approve it as a whole. And then the delegation to make that check presentation could have happened later on. I'll tell you something right now, it would have been a lot more palatable, and there could have been some genuine celebration at that time. Instead, here we are. The other aspect of that is that during the council meeting, the number kept changing. So I ask you folks, how does that come about? Is that transparent? Is that the way council should anticipate things to be? My answer to that is no. And yes, I was put in a very awkward position. I didn't want to do that. As a matter of fact, that's why I asked questions prior to the meeting. I didn't want to be placed in that position. Yet I was. I would ask the clerk now to please put up a document that I sent her earlier on. And I would assure you folks that if we were going out to market for something in particular and staff found a way to reduce the costs, I'm pretty sure there'd be a report come back to council on that. I also get the impression that there was some urgency to put this rainbow crosswalk in place. So could you bring that up on the screen, please? The rainbow one, not the, yes. And the document that's coming up on the screen, folks, I've just kind of highlighted it because that's the only document that has ever been presented to me, that has ever, been submitted to me. The only document that I'm familiar with, and this document was revisited again in December of 2022. So it's a document, it's a staff recommendation report by our own staff members, Jody Wong, Brianna Dean, and it's a request for a rainbow crosswalk. And if you could cursor down, please, to the next highlighted portion. It's a ways, there we go. And this part here is the one that I want to speak about because you can't just simply put whatever kind of paint you want down on the ground. As a matter of fact, the Ontario Traffic Manual doesn't even have anything in there that suggests that a rainbow sidewalk can be made. They have very strict guidelines for what crosswalks will be. Most communities have reached out to another organization to try and obtain some guidelines, and there are certain guidelines that we are expected, I guess, to follow to reduce the risk associated with, I guess for lack of a better term, not following the specific guidelines in place for crosswalks. But staff consulted the Thermoplastic Surface Solutions, a supplier, on the application of thermoplastic rainbow. The estimated costs for the purchase of the thermoplastic materials and contracted labor to implement a permanent rainbow crosswalk varied depending on the style and material selected. The estimated cost for the installation of a rainbow crossing in the longitudinal design on a single approach west side to the intersection is approximately $7,220.59 plus staff time to install. Okay, can you move down a little bit further, please, Clerk Ainsworth? This is the area that I just spoke to. The Ontario Traffic Manual provides information and guidance for the transportation practitioners and promote uniformity of treatment in the design, application, and operation of traffic-controlled devices and systems across Ontario. A crosswalk is a traffic-controlled device. The latest version of the OTM does not have a specific standards for rainbow crosswalks. The OTM includes several options for crosswalk designs. I was informed of this. I still supported it going forward, as did everybody else on council that day. Can you go further down, please? Past all the pictures. I think we're going right to the very end. Right here. Staff requests council approve of the rainbow crosswalk installation on Queen Street and Maria Street in Elmville. The crosswalk will be using the thermoplastic method and reflect the Progress Pride flag design. Financial implications. The financial impact for the cost of thermoplastic material, paint and installation, labor for the rainbow crosswalk is estimated to be $9,000 because it also included something that council approved here at the Administration Center, and I have referred to the rainbow sidewalk. That's supposed to be installed outside this building. And further down, please. I just want to highlight here that this was reviewed by Mr. Mahesh Ramdale, the General Manager, Infrastructure and Operational Services, our Financial Director, as well as our CAO, Mr. Jeff Schmidt. This is the only document that was ever produced and provided to me on behalf of staff. This is the only document I had before I went to that meeting where the delegation was coming back before council. So I guess my question would be, where was the mistake made? Was the mistake made back in August of 2022 when staff came to council with this estimate? Or is the real number the number that they came up with at the last council meeting where the delegation came before council? So I said I was confused at that time. This is the reason why I was confused. I'm going to say that there's 3 different ways that it could have been dealt with in a more appropriate manner. Number 1, staff could have come back before council to make a presentation, as I've indicated, to say that there was a reduction in costs and they were able to make it happen. That would have been great because we wouldn't be sitting here now. The second one is a council member could have easily offered to use approved funding that each council member now has in the amount of $4,000 to help offset that amount that might have been short. And the third one would be a council member could have come back before council, said, we really like to see this in our community. They're a little bit short on cash. Is there any way that council can revisit this and approve it as is? That's 3 ways it could have happened quite easily, and we wouldn't be sitting here. Instead, as I said, here we are. So in my mind, this was not handled the right way. And I'm not afraid to tell folks that I'm disappointed in the way it was handled. I'm not disappointed in the Rainbow Crosswalk initiative itself. Thank you.
CEO Schmidt?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Just wanted to clarify one point. The comment was made that when staff have approved budgets for projects and are required to come back to council when we underspend. As you may recall, the township has an annual budget with multiple projects in the budget. We come in under budget on many of those projects, and we don't come back to council on an individual project basis to tell you or update you on that. So just to clarify that point, I would ask GM Ramdeo to maybe comment on the process that was undertaken since August of last year when the staff report came forward and subsequent to the meeting that occurred at the April 19th date.
Thank you. Before I do go to GM Ramdeo, as this was petitioning members do have their hand up to speak, so if you wanted to go before GM Ramdeo or after? GM Ramdeo?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to all of council. Out of the August 3rd, 2022 meeting, the resolution also changed our design from a flat design, which covered the entire pavement, to the ladder design. At that point in time, my direction to my staff was the quotation that we did receive, that we provided in that report, would no longer be valid, and I asked them to go back out to suppliers to requote the ladder design. So based upon that, we got new prices for the materials that we would need for the ladder design. Manager Dean also reached out to EDHS via phone call in September of last year and via emails in December of 2022 and February of 2023, advising them of council's decision for the 50%, and also getting information from them on the what they were able to raise. In terms of we've been in, Manager Dean had been in conversations with EDHS on that aspect. In terms of the numbers that were presented in the last meeting, there were 2 options. One, if we were to do it by staff, there was one cost, staff cost, plus the material supply, and a second higher number if done by a contractor. The difference between the 2 is our staff are not as experienced putting down this kind of crosswalk. So there's a concern in terms of how it might look, not necessarily the quality. We've got the equipment to install it, but in terms of the finished quality versus a contractor. And those were the 2 options that we were considering. Staff cost plus material supply plus a contractor install. And that's the process up to last meeting in terms of the costing.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher?
A question for Manager Ramdeo. Did you communicate this new pricing to any members of council prior to the last meeting? As I said, many of us did not know, so I'd like to know if any other members of council were privy to this information.
GM Ramdeo?
Through you to Councillor Fisher. Councillor Fisher, no. this information was not, to the best of my recollection, not communicated out, not to council.
Follow on Councillor Fisher and then Councillor Moore.
Manager Romdeo, is it possible that anybody in your staff would have communicated that to a member of council prior to?
GM Ramdeo.
Through you, Mayor Coughlin, to Councillor Fisher, I would say it is possible. I'm not aware.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I really just want to speak to a couple of things. My name is on the petition, and I would put my name on any petition that a council member thought an item was important enough to petition for. So, of course, I would always do that for a council member. I was also part of the meetings last August, and I sat here with Mayor Coughlin and Deputy Mayor Cabral, and through the presentation for the Rainbow Sidewalk and Stairs. The intention at the time, and my understanding truly was that the EDHS would come back to us with 50%. That was my understanding, and that was the intent of the conversation at the time. So when the meeting came forward, our last meeting, when the presentation came forward for the check, I too was surprised. I was surprised. I didn't say anything, but I did meet with CAO Schmidt a couple of days later and asked the same question, because I expected a $4,000 check, not a $1,000 check. So I'm very grateful to Deputy Cabral for being as brave as he is and for speaking his mind. It had nothing to do with the crosswalk itself. We happily approved that, but it does come down to just a budget and a misunderstanding. CAO Schmidt and I spoke about the semantics using required versus requested, and we do a lot of motions. And like Deputy Cabral said, you know, our clerk is so good at writing our motions that I don't know that a process change is necessary. I would like to think that the intent of the message is always captured in the motion, because I would hate to think going forward we have to be so like specific with a word like requested versus required. And maybe that's a conversation council has to have later. So I just wanted to say my piece and let you know that, of course, I support this council always. And if it was an error in staff, then I would hope that next time something this important comes forward, that the staff report comes forward prior to the meeting. And but I do thank you too for all your interest and your letters. I've been reading all the letters, and thank you so much. That's it.
Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and I'm getting over a bit of a cold, so apologies if I stop a couple times, but I'm going to take a bit of a different approach here, and I don't want what that delegation was last week, which was absolutely, or 2 weeks ago, which was incredible, the Anvil District High School GSD group coming forward. I don't want their hard work to get lost in this conversation, and I don't think anybody does up here. While I was not on council at the time when this initially was put forward, I learned that the total was $2,200, whatever the total was, at the exact same time that everybody else did. And I assumed it was a larger amount as well. And when I saw the $1,000 check, I had no problem with it, because I believe we should be, as I know we all do, supporting our high schools, supporting our students. And when we have young members of our community coming to delegate in front of council, I'm sure it's scary. I'm sure it would be daunting. And we should be creating an environment where they feel like they can do that all the time. So, of course, I 100% support what's happened, and I don't see issue with the $1,000 donation.
Deputy Cabral.
Thank you very much. I hate to point it out, Councillor Garwood, but you're sitting in that seat because you decided to be a councillor and part of a council, which means that you should support all council motions. That's what the expectation is. I have a lot of other things that I could be saying here, but I'm not going to. I do respect those students. I was here for the very first presentation that they made to this council, and I was enthusiastic. I thought, what a great opportunity, you know. They're here before council. They want to put this in place. They'll be able to engage the community. It's an opportunity. And that went to a recommendation that staff report back to us. I'm not taking anything away from those students, okay? Fact of the matter is, you were also given the motion. You had opportunity to read the report. I'm going to suggest that, well, maybe you didn't, and you didn't know what the amount was going to be, but I did not know what the amount was going to be. The other point I want to make on this is that when we came into that council, it wasn't $2,200, Councillor Garwood. It started off higher than that. They didn't even have a number when we came into that council meeting. As a matter of fact, it seemed like everything was being orchestrated to make that number fit. And I have to reach out to Councillor Thompson there and thank him for stepping up to the plate and saying that he'd make up the difference. But to simply sit here and say that it's okay, on the emotional side, I agree with you 100%. On the rules side, the way things should be done, the way they were orchestrated, the way council of the day had anticipated they would go, no, I don't. And in respect to General Manager Ramdeo, I think that when things do change to the extent that it's 77% less, and when a councillor makes inquiries, not one but two councillors apparently, now that I find out that Councillor Moore also made inquiries, and that the clerk and the CAO are aware of these concerns and questions, and no effort whatsoever is made to apprise councillors of the new figure that's going to be coming before them at council. And I might add that those items and those numbers came up after the delegation, not before.
Councillor Fisher?
Through you to Councillor Garwood, we do not get to break the rules just because it suits our ideology. We have to adhere to these rules. I also have to say, I've reviewed the recordings of last meeting, and I can honestly tell you, I feel that there was some level of malfeasance. I believe that some members of this council had prior knowledge that there was a much lower amount than the $7,000, $9,000, $3,000 or $4,000 that was being quoted to us ahead of time. Mayor Coughlin at one point talks about going to a third party at 1 hour, 19 minutes and 29 seconds into the meeting. I think personally it's a telltale sign that we knew about an outcome, or she did. At 1 minute, 24 and 15 seconds, Mayor Coughlin said that Councillor Thompson had stole her thunder, implying to me that she probably had a different outcome planned. So I have to say, I feel that there was some level of knowledge from other members of council, and I feel that there was some level of malfeasance happening behind our backs.
Thank you. I will address the direct, whichever. The thunder that was stolen was, I too was going to say that I'll just pay for it, because to me there was no difference. We had set aside $9,000, and whether you choose to think the word may or shall, these words that are chosen for resolutions are very specific. When we look at our municipal act, it says a councillor may do something, which provides direction with leeway. A councillor shall do something, that is concise direction. So to me, the material was purchased, it was ready to go, and to be very honest with council, I learned, maybe it was a week, I don't remember the date, but I learned that a project to move forward the next day by our staff was to put the crosswalk down. This was very late at night. I called C.O. Schmidt at a non-professional hour and said to him, what is going on? How is this crosswalk going out? Council needs to be made aware of it. EDHS needs to be made aware of it. How is it just moving forward? So that, to me, I hope shows this council that I absolutely wanted that crosswalk in years ago, but it wasn't. But I do want it to go in at a time where we're all there as a community together to celebrate that step that we're taking. As far as not following rules and following rules, whether you choose to look at the word, pick it apart, there was direction to get it done. It got done. And if EDHS had to come forward with a check for $70, I still would have been moving forward with this project and would have found alternate funding. Or petition council or ask council to look
Point
to
of
different ways.
order, Mayor Coughlin, are you suggesting that if we didn't have sufficient funds, that we would just simply forge ahead?
Um,
Because that's what it sounds like to me.
Deputy Mayor Cabral, you had the microphone. We started at 3:01, and I listened quietly and respectfully until you were finished. I would ask for the same decorum in return. My concern was that the amount had been budgeted for. We had taken $9,000 from whichever pocket reserve funding allocation that you want to suggest. It wasn't that we taxed people $4,500. We taxed $9,000. That was done. Anything else was essentially a bonus. It was a partnership. So while maybe you see it a different way, I feel that we're following the rules. We had a $9,000 budget. It was put into the budget. It was approved by council, and we carried on. That's my opinion. Councillor Thompson.
Through the chair to Councillor Fisher, you've alluded that you feel it's something underhanded. I'm not, what was the word that you used?
I used the word malfeasance, and I did not allude to it.
All right, I'm not sure what that word means. Could you just explain a little more and help me understand what you're alluding to, or do you have knowledge, or are you making an accusation, or?
No, I'm saying upon reviewing the tapes, it's my feeling that certain members of council, and I was very clear about this, had expressed knowledge of exactly or very close to the amount that it would come out to. When I know myself and other members of council did not know it was a moving target for the actual amount. So that's what I meant. I think it was pretty clear when I said it.
And before I do go to Councillor Alexander, I think for myself anyway, having worked in this community and corporation, I have a different trust level with staff. And because I have a different trust level does not imply that I have lower professional standards and that I'm assuming that things are going to just, to me, it was a resolution came forward. It was approved by previous council and again was brought forward to this council. The work was continuing. I never for a moment assumed that there was anything malfeasance or accusing that I was literally trying to move a project forward behind council's back when there's resolutions that are approved by council and staff are literally following that direction. So while I understand that when, much like having this meeting called and members of this council have no idea why we're even here. So information for different people have different information all the time. I'm in this office all the time. I talk to members of council sometimes. I reach out, somebody hear back. We all have different relationships with different people. So just because you felt that I was doing something at any point, pick up the phone and ask me, Mayor Coughlin, are you trying to push forward a crosswalk behind closed doors? And I'll tell you, no. When I found out it was going to happen, I stopped it so that we could all be there together to celebrate it. Is there any new information on this, or is there a resolution from the petitioning? Oh, sorry, Councillor Alexander.
So not necessarily new information. I would like to ask a question, just again for my clarity. I am still rather new at this, so I'm trying to make sure I understand the process properly. So I think my question would be to you, Clerk Ainsworth. My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is when we do the conformatory bylaw at the end of a meeting, it's essentially making any resolution or motion that has happened before a bylaw. So this was where my concern was. If, again, whether it's semantics or wording, there was a bylaw that said 50% was to be paid from or raised by this group. That number was $9,000. No, staff doesn't have to come back to us every single time, but that's a significant amount. And again, there was no information saying that it was a lower amount. So I felt it was questions we had to ask, or we could be getting ourselves in trouble by moving something forward that we actually weren't allowed to move forward. Again, if we wanted to make an amendment and say, you know what, we're just going to take $1,000. This is only cost $3,000. I want to amend that. That's great. That to me would have been the proper process to do this. And I think regardless of the group and regardless of the great work that people do, we have to make sure we're following the proper process, or we shouldn't be sitting here. And that's really what my concern is.
Thank you. And Clerk Ainsworth, as the resolution before staff and council of that time, in your, I'm not gonna ask the question, I'm not gonna put you on the spot like that, but yes, there is semantics, and it's, to me, a difference of may and shall, request and demand, as Councillor Deputy Cabral said. So at this point, is there a resolution or direction that's coming from this? Deputy Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I would ask for a report to come back before council outlining how this happened, outlining when certain things were put in place, when the estimates were first obtained, what the final price was, including the invoices to support that. Because when I read it, and you're absolutely right, it was 7,900 to 9,000 to come from that reserve. However, half of that was going to be coming back. So the problem is that nobody provided any insight into, and it wouldn't have taken a whole heck of a lot to provide insight to somehow or other staff managed to come up with a better price. So I would like to see a report come forward actually outlining that with some documentation, providing, and also to ensure that whatever specifications are in place to mitigate the potential risks that we're accepting by putting it in, to also be on there. And I'll let folks know, I have reached out to the governing body that does, I don't know what their name is, they're kind of like the federal people who tell you how sidewalks should be and how roads should be built. And they are actually doing a study right now on a project to ascertain what types of materials and how rainbow crosswalks should be installed. I haven't gotten a reply from them yet. As a matter of fact, I will ask, maybe if you don't mind, a quick question to Director Ramdeo. They may very well have replied back to the township because I did send it from my township mail. I'm just curious, maybe he did get something back.
GM Ramdeo, has there been correspondence received?
Through you, Mayor Coughlin, to Deputy Mayor Cabral. I have not received anything to that effect now.
Would you be able to share with us the name of the organization?
I am not sure which organization you reached out to, but generally specifications are done by either the Ontario Traffic Manual body or the Transportation Association of Canada.
That's the one.
Follow
TAC.
on, Deputy Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Just to revert back to my resolution.
And Clerk Ainsworth was typing away as you were speaking there. Clerk Ainsworth, can you read what you have written, please?
Thank you. I would seek some clarification. So far, I have that a report be brought forward regarding the Rainbow Crosswalk project, outlining changes to the costing, and then that's where I would require you to repeat a few of the items you were requesting.
Deputy Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I guess outlining the original estimates, how they were obtained, and at what point in time there was further dialogue regarding bringing the Rainbow Crosswalk online. Was it in December? Was it in January? At what point in time did they realize that there were significantly less costs attributable to the project, and also to supply whatever invoices and whatever correspondence went back and forth between the suppliers? I think, Mayor Coughlin, it's only fair to say that I don't envy being placed in this type of a position going forward. I think information is key. It allows us to do our job properly. It allows us to do it in an informed way, and it allows all of us to be on the same footing going forward.
Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you, and please let me know if you would like any changes. That a report be brought forward regarding the Rainbow Crosswalk project, outlining changes to the costing, original estimates and how they were obtained, timelines and background information relating to the changes being proposed, including correspondence to such items. And I believe you requested information regarding the standards.
Deputy Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, through you to Clerk Ainsworth. Unfortunately, the standards aren't specifically in place, but if we could include the standards that were utilized for the project and invoices pertaining to same. There was specific paints or specific vinyls that were used. I just want to see how that came to be, that those were the ones that were selected.
Councillor Thompson?
Will this motion in any way hold up the project or delay the project?
While Clerk Ainsworth is finishing writing here, CEO Schmidt, can you speak, and maybe just for members of the public that are here today, and council, where is the sidewalk at and what is the installation date?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So the staff is prepared to move forward with the project, subject to Council's discussion this evening. If the project is still a go, we anticipate that the project could be completed as early as next week, and we could be looking at having a celebratory event towards the end of next week, subject to Council's direction today.
Thank you. Deputy Cabral?
Thank you. I'd just like to state I have no desire to see the project not go forward. So if you're looking, I got the impression that it was going forward based on what we accepted. I'm good with that. Thank you.
And Clerk Ainsworth, if you could read what you have, and then I'll seek a seconder.
That a report be brought forward regarding the Rainbow Crosswalk project, outlining changes to the costing, original estimates and how they were obtained, timelines and background information relating to the changes being proposed, including correspondence to such items, and that information relating to the construction details, paint, equipment, etc. be included in the report.
And a seconder? Councillor Fisher? So the resolution that was just read before us, council all in favor? And that has carried. Are there any other items before we move on to 3.2? And seeing none, I will look to petitioning member to open discussion on the drag story time hosted by the Springwater Public Library. Councillor Fisher?
Before I start today, I'd like the public to know that the management of the Springwater Library were requested to meet with council today to be transparent on matters pertaining directly to the taxpayer-funded institution they manage. They have decided to decline that request. It has come to the surprise of many residents that the library operates separately from Springwater Council. Other than some financial budgetary oversight, they act autonomously. With this autonomy, the library has concern themselves with social issues rather than literacy and learning. After incessantly asking for a copy of the signed contract for Drag Queen Storytime and supporting documents, I finally received a copy just days ago, despite the contract being dated February the 8th. It was then we finally were able to see the performing organization our library decided to hire. For those counselors who have shown they condone this in our community, I want you to know you are not representing the majority of the taxpayers, and you have let virtue signaling take the place of social stable governance. I know I speak for many residents who want their tax dollars funding a library that champions literacy, learning. Let's turn the Springwater Library back into an institution it was meant to be. And later on in closed session, I would like to show images from the website from the organization our library hired, but I will be doing that in closed session.
Councillor Alexander?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So I'd like to speak to the narrative that is currently occurring around the drag story time. Excuse me. I don't want to speak for all of council, but I do feel that every one of us would agree that they want to have an inclusive Springwater. Hosting a specific program, such as Drag Story Time, does not make something inclusive. It is every person's day-to-day actions and how they choose to treat people that speaks to inclusivity. Whether this should or shouldn't be, this is a very divisive issue. And it's okay that residents of Springwater have differing opinions on it. It is not okay to assume that if someone is against the program, that they are not inclusive of the LGBTQ2S+ community. They simply don't agree with a specific piece of children's programming. If inclusivity, is the goal, then simply writing off someone's opinion that doesn't agree with your own is never going to get us to the end goal. All we're doing is creating larger divides.
Deputy Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I know that I received a number of emails, and I found myself in a position where they were being directed to me, and as Councillor Fisher has indicated, the library board is at arm's length from council. That doesn't mean that people in Springwater Township didn't reach out to their councillors, some specifically to me, some in a generic fashion to all council members. I found myself in a position where I had to speak to the issue, and I was removing my personal opinion out of it. My concerns are, with respect to this, is that I don't know that this has actually come from the community itself. I think this is something that has perpetuated itself through librarians, for lack of a better use of a term. I haven't heard of it taking place in any of our schools. They have libraries inside them as well. And I, to be frank, have been to cabarets of such years and years and years ago in San Francisco with my aunt and uncle, and I'm not afraid to say that. However, I do question why someone would contact me and speak about it, because I hadn't even heard about it, and apparently, obviously, it's been going on since prior to February, because the contract was signed then, to take taxpayer funding to pay for something and try and wrap it in this concept of being open, inclusive, and welcoming. Our libraries are exactly that. I've never had anybody come to me and say, hey, I was treated indifferently there because of any particular reason. The problem I have with this is I don't think that the drag queen, first off, it's very divisive. It's become extremely confrontational. As a matter of fact, when they were going to make a presentation before council, they canceled that because that's what it's become. So my question to me as a councillor then becomes, what benefit is this to our community? Is it going to create an inclusive, warm, welcoming spot for everybody in the township to come to our libraries? Because that already exists. So what I see it doing actually is the exact opposite of providing the outcome that folks are looking for. That's one of the difficulties I have with it, especially when someone phones me and asks me, given that I was in law enforcement prior to, what security options would I recommend for them? Well, that's a bit of a red flag for me right off the bat. If we have to do that, maybe we better rethink what we're doing. So those were two of my chief concerns, and that's outside of some of the relevant points and observations that some of the residents in Springwater Township, I would suggest, made of their own volition. I know that I replied today to one letter that came specifically addressed to me regarding today's meeting, and I was fairly forthright. It was in respect of the sidewalk for the most part. However, when we're talking about our public library, the other aspect is I don't watch the show, I don't subscribe to Crave. It has won some awards, and that's the drag race. And my thoughts on that are this. You know, we have a group of people who basically provide advisories for all kinds of different things. Movies, they're R-rated, they're G-rated, they're family-rated. We also have the same thing for television programs, and I'm sure that Bell Media has a slew of lawyers, and I was found out that that particular TV show is rated 14+. So that kind of says to me what's going on here. The other thing about having it so that it's, inclusive and open to everybody is this is not, and people will say, well, you don't have to go if you don't want to. But the issue really is that even kids can't go to it if they want to. Their parents have to take them. So my thought is it a theatrical performance for the children, or is it a theatrical performance of a novel nature for the adults that will be attending? I don't know, folks, but I think it would be something better if it was maybe undertaken by a private entity and they charged a fee to get in. But when it comes to divide the community, it becomes a problem for all of us. That's the downside.
Any other members of council? Councillor Garwood?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I want to share a bit of a story I actually heard from a resident who I asked if I could share this story. I spoke with a resident this morning, and she gave me a call, and she was speaking about her personal experience with the drag story time and how she's taken her son to one of these events in another community previously, and she spoke about how there was no protests, it wasn't divisive, it was kind, it was an hour, and it was people of our community wearing colorful outfits, talking about stories, Cinderella and Rapunzel and all of those things. And this member of the community, when she spoke with me, she said, I'm not fully for it, I'm not fully against it. She goes, I just believe in an inclusive community. And if you don't want to go, don't go. Just like if I don't want to go to something in the community, I won't go. When it comes to this, absolutely it has become divisive. I wish it wasn't. I wish we lived in a world where this was just another event happening. But while it isn't our purview, as we know and as has been mentioned, I do believe that we need to create an environment or support that environment that is welcoming. And while I think Springwater is a very welcoming community for all, I do think that whether this helps one person, it's worth it. I don't know that person. I don't identify as a member of that specific community, but we can be allies. We can support. And if you don't want to go, don't go. So while I have young kids myself, I don't often take my kids to programming at the library. I should, but I haven't. But I think we need to, it's an opportunity, right? I think, will I bring my children? Should my wife and I decide to go? Absolutely. Because it's in our community. I think we need to always support initiatives in our community. And again, if it's not your personal belief, I don't think that we need to, or I'm going to speak for myself. I'm going to clarify. I'm not going to insert my personal opinion. While my opinion is absolutely to support, I'm representing residents. And the phone call I spoke about earlier on from that wonderful lady, or the 20 to 30 emails I've received over the past week in support. Some not as well, and those folks deserve to be heard and responded to as well. But I believe that if my community is saying to support something, then that's what I'm going to do. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Councillor Thompson, then Fisher, and I also have comment.
My grandson was with my wife at story time at the public library today. It was amazing. And yes, an adult had to take him because he's 2.5 years old, and we go on a regular basis. I am not happy that really the chairman of our chair of our library board and our CEO of the library board aren't here today, but they're not here today because this really isn't the process for them. They have a library board. If we really understand proper process, and even though they were summoned to be here. It's not okay with me that the CEO of our library board was threatened, harassed, to the point where she needed to have the police involved. That's not okay with me. And that didn't come from some outside group. That came from us, residents of Springwater. I'm not okay with that. I was challenged after one of these meetings to go and read the Bible because I'm in favor of the drag queen story time. I'd like to let you know I've read the Bible. It starts out by saying an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and then it ends with saying love God and love your neighbor. Gandhi said that an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, if we live like that, that the whole world becomes blind. I don't want that to be us, or I don't want that to be Springwater. I too have received a lot of correspondence, and I'm pleased that there has been a lot of local people, residents of Springwater, paying attention to this important issue. Whether it's contentious or not, it needs to be before us, and each of us needs to decide where we stand. To be honest, I've seen a lot of hateful comments, and I've seen a lot of hopeful comments. I would like to let you know that I stand for the hopeful comments. I'd like to see a vote sometime today, and I'd like to know where each councillor stand, even though that it'll be only representative where we stand, because this really is a library board issue. And that's, the Library Act states that, the province of Ontario states that. We can have an opinion for sure, and we can come and give our opinion and ask for them to come so that we can grill them and maybe whatever the intent was today, I don't know, because I wasn't a part of that. I wasn't asked about it, even though I am the representative of the library board, and nobody came and asked me about it or had a discussion with me about it, which I'm not sure why, or maybe they can speak to that. But sometime, to the chair, I'd like to see some kind of a vote as to where people stand on this issue.
Councillor Fisher? Your microphone, Councillor.
Oh. Well, everyone should know where I stand. I am against drag queen story time. As a matter of fact, as I stated before, this contract is dated February the 8th. It was only recently that I was able to go and research the organization that is to perform for our children. I can tell you that on that website, I found images that were bordering on pornography. So when you talk about bringing your children there, being open with it, when you talk about inclusivity, I'm sorry, my definition of openness and inclusivity does not include having children subjected to this type of thing. Not anytime, and not with taxpayers' dollars. I am totally opposed to it.
And then, no, decorum. I began, when I first learned of this, to be quite honest, my initial reaction was one of sensationalized and sexual performances, much like at Woody's when I'm down in Toronto. And I too looked into this. I looked into the performers, Jay and whoever it was, and went on their website, and then continued to be challenged by members of my family, members of our community, and dug in. I think I obviously still have a lot more to learn, but challenged my own perception on what grooming is, on what trans pharma is, on what transhumanism is, and I have come to realize that this is not sensationalized. The research, and I look forward to seeing, again, being challenged, but this to me is performance. These, and I don't mean clown in a derogatory way, but this is a person wearing a costume reading to children, and that ideal is not shared amongst everyone, and we are elected to represent everyone. So it does become difficult when, and no offense to the media, when people reach out and want to know what how our council feels. And then I'm being asked to talk specifically about how each individual member feels, which I won't do, because I don't speak for any individual. I do speak for this council. I think that it is important for our residents to know how this council feels. Again, this programming is at arm's length. Whether we want to see contracts or whichever, that's not my purview. That's CEO Delgado's purview. That's not even, she doesn't even report to CEO Schmidt. So to me, how and when they got these contracts in place, I don't know how long something like this takes to plan. That's irrelevant to me. The programming for the library, I continually hear rave reviews from our residents. I think that the board and the staff probably have a better idea of what our residents that go to the library want. I don't pretend to fully understand both either side of it, but I do know that I am certain that in my position as an elected official, I can say that I wholeheartedly feel that this community, our community, wants and needs programming like this. My daughter herself, lives in a different world than I grew up in. She is a member of her hockey team, and she doesn't know the gender. She doesn't know their sexual whichever. And to me, it's a different world. And in order for us to help ensure that we can bring people together and work with our kids to be okay and to just be included and not exclude other people, this programming serves a purpose. It serves a large emotional topic, but I don't see it in the same way that other members do. So I think that it is important that in order for us as a council to have an opinion, Councillor Thompson, I do agree that whether this council does what we do individually, it's difficult, but I can see that. I had over here Councillor Alexander and then Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. And I agree with much of what you said. I don't have a personal, I couldn't tell you exactly where I lie on this personally. I've changed my mind numerous times since I first heard about it. There's a lot of moving pieces to it. And end of the day, I think it's really irrelevant what any actual member of council, their personal opinion is. It's not our job to promote our personal opinions. It is our job to advocate for the residents that reach out to us. Yes, there's been both, and I get everybody has different opinions coming at them. I can tell you that majority of the correspondence I received has been very against the issue. So I have to at least question the issue. That's my job. The one thing, and again, I certainly don't think we wanted to summon CEO Delgado and the chair here. I think there's questions I have for them. There's questions I tried to ask one-on-one with them and didn't get answers. And I think these are questions that the residents have, and they deserve, whether or not we can ask them. The library doesn't report to us, but they are employed by the taxpayer. So they do have to answer to the taxpayer, in my opinion. The thing I'm struggling the most with about this presentation going forward is if CEO Delgado felt that she was receiving threatening phone calls to her library, to the staff of the library, if that situation, at first that safety concern was so high that she felt she needed to not present to council, that's horrible. I'm behind that completely. That's a horrible thing. But then why are we moving ahead and putting our children in harm's way? Because again, maybe there are situations where there hasn't been issues with this. I know the city of Midland had protesters outside. I know this can be very divisive, and whether or not there are residents protesting or they're outsiders coming in, we're still potentially putting our children in harm's way. And I just don't understand why we would do that. I know that as a parent, whether or not I was fully supportive of something or not, I would never take my child to an event where they may get hurt just to make a political stand.
I have, not Councillor Moore, Councillor Thompson.
My understanding is that the Simcoe School Board supports this initiative. I know that all the libraries in our area are having, this isn't new, are having this program. the Barrie Library this past week has announced that they're having the program. And so these are all very well educated people. They're people that have the community trust in protecting our children. There's been in no way are any of us trying to groom children or harm children in any way at all. And I think that narrative is inappropriate, uncalled for, and there's no supporting evidence of such information. Would also like to point out, and this is through the chair to CEO Schmidt, how appropriate is it for us to be having a conversation about the library?
CEO Schmidt?
Through you, Mayor Coghlan, to Councillor Thompson. Councillor Thompson, I would suggest that because council does appoint the library board, the members of the board, there could be conversations as it relates to that, as it relates to dictating what the library does, programming and such, not your prerogative.
Follow on, Councillor Thompson?
So in your opinion, are we out of our lane calling this meeting on this item and having this discussion?
I'm not going to turn to CEO Schmidt for that. This was okay. My apologies. I was simply saying that CEO Schmidt's opinion on whether or not 4 members of council called an appropriate meeting, I don't know that. CEO Schmidt, I will leave it to you to answer.
Thank you, Mayor Coghlan. Through the township's procedural bylaw, council members have the opportunity to call a special meeting as they did today. The topics that they chose, up to them.
Deputy Cabral, and then Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coghlan. Mary Coghlan. You know, this is reflective of the community, folks. There's some of you, I would suspect, are here in support of it, and there may be someone here that's not in support of it. And you know what, as I said at the beginning, I think personal opinions aside, I kind of alluded to my main concerns, but I'd also like to point out something else too. There's money involved here. The other aspect is that this is kind of like a herd mentality. I hate to say it, but it's not like people were banging at my door asking for this presentation to take place in my community. However, it seems to be that it started down in the San Francisco area, which does not surprise me at all. You know, they have a significant population, and I think that they would be supportive of it. The problem is, I think, as it started to migrate, it became something of a pet project for librarians and found its way into the libraries. And the only reason I say that is because people are being paid for it. They're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart. So I do have an issue with that, you know, it's coming to the community, it's doing everything that kind of is opposite to what I would really like to see as a representative on council, because it's divisive, it's confrontational, it's bringing out, I hate to say it, folks, the worst in some people. So is it a difficult, emotional thing? Sure it is. But I have to sit back and ask myself the basic reason. Why? Is it really promoting everything that we think that it is? Or is somebody making $1 off of it? I heard someone say they do it for an hour, and I can't remember, maybe Councillor Fisher can remember what the fee was that they were charging.
Councillor Fisher?
It's $900, and I believe that's spread over the course of 3 libraries. You know, at the very least, it's $300 an hour for this performance.
I'm going to go to Councillor Thompson, and I've seen Fisher and Garwood.
Plus HST. I would also add, for information, not that we couldn't use tax dollars for this, but this program is entirely funded by the fundraising of the Friends of the Library. So for those that are so worried about tax dollars, no tax dollars will be used for this event. Councillor
Garwood? Oh, sorry, I said Fisher first.
It may not be used, may not be paid for with tax dollars. It will be in a taxpayer-funded facility. Anyway, that's one point I had to make. As for us not having control over the library, we are elected by the taxpayers. We do represent them. When we receive a slew of emails, many calls, all voicing opposition, most of which were voicing opposition to this, we do have an obligation to act, and we do have an obligation to speak to it. I personally believe to stick our heads in the sand and ignore the issue is to really not respect the office that we've been elected for.
Councillor Garwood?
Just 2 points. The first point, I was going to mention the exact same thing Councillor Thompson did. And second thing is, I don't think we can speak for who's received what sort of communication. Just in the last 24 hours, I've probably gotten 20 emails in support of this. So I think we're probably all maybe receiving different communication, some collectively, and that's fine. I think that's representative of Springwater, many different communities. We all elect, or we all represent different communities within our municipalities. So I'll leave it there.
Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Again, I'll just start by saying that I would put my name on any petition where a council member has requested and has an important topic that they would want to bring forward. Secondly, I am glad to hear from Councillor Thompson, and this is new information, that the Friends of the Library fundraising events will be paying for the Drag Queen Storytime. That is new information to me, and I'm certainly glad to hear that. And also, I understand, CAO Schmidt, that the venue has been changed. So the venue is no longer at the library, it's actually now at the community hall. Am I correct?
CAO Schmidt?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Councillor Moore. Councillor Moore, I can't confirm whether or not it was originally planned or scheduled for the library. My understanding, it is scheduled for the community hall in Elmville.
Follow on, Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I'd like to add that I am disappointed that CAO Delgado and the chair of the board did not come, because I think it's a great opportunity for conversation to have simple questions like that answered. I'm saddened that she feels that this isn't a safe space. I feel like she probably felt a little intimidated herself by coming and calling it a grueling, or I feel a bit saddened by that. But secondly, I did sit on the library board for 4 years, so I'm fully aware of the story times and the great work that the library does and the great programming. But just to reiterate that we are an arm's length from the library. We can't dictate programming. I thank you for all your emails, but I really can't do anything about the programming that the library decides to run. But to say that I am glad to hear that the venue has changed, and I am glad to hear that their own fundraising events will pay for it. Thank you.
Not seeing any other hands. Councillor Thompson, you had a vote?
I'm not sure of the proper terminology, but can we, what's, Clerk Ainsworth, can you help me with the?
Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you. So if council would like to propose a motion at this time, that's what they would request, and just to advise what you would be looking to seek out of the motion, and I could draft from there.
Okay, I would propose a motion to support this event at our Springwater Library and show support for our library staff, our CEO, and for the Drag Queen Storytime Initiative.
Question. And I, second, a question. Councillor Moore?
So could I please get the clerk to explain how we could vote on something that reflects library programming when we are not in any kind of authority to do so?
Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you. From my understanding, Councillor Thompson would just like a motion of support or endorsement. It wouldn't be anything binding to the library, so council could pass a motion to support or endorse something the library is presenting, same as motions of support or lobbying for different levels of government for items that council would like to see pushed through. It's something that isn't binding on the library, but it is within the purview of council to pass.
Thank you. And I'm just actually going to get a seconder for that, just so that we can have conversation pertaining to it. Councillor Garwood, seconder. Deputy Cabral, comment?
Thank you very much, Mayor Coughlin. I have to be honest with you folks. I've tried to remove my personal opinion from this. And the reason for that is my personal opinion does not count specifically here. But I think you folks also understand what my concerns are. So as much as I don't think that we should be voting because that personal flavor is going to manifest itself one way or the other, as it is that we have a divisive council on it already, we have support and detraction. I will vote, but I really, to be quite frank with you, would prefer not to be placed in that position.
Thank you. And Councillor Alexander, and then Fisher.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So again, I will vote as well, but I will vote for what I feel the residents want. I will not vote for my personal opinion because I do not feel that is why I am sitting here.
I had Councillor Fisher.
I feel that this vote is totally useless. It just continues divisiveness. I think that most people here probably wanted to know my opinion, and I've been quite clear. But to goad other members of council into endorsing an opinion, I think this was a discussion that was meant to happen, and this is a motion and a vote that simply doesn't need to happen.
Cabral, and then I do have comment.
Thank you. Through Mayor Coughlin to Clerk Ainsworth. With respect to the vote, non-voting members, how would that occur if a member abstains from voting?
Abstention is voted in the negative. Sorry, Clerk Ainsworth.
Thank you. Yes, that is correct. Abstaining from voting is a vote in the negative to the motion that is on the floor.
My comments are just going to be in my first term of council. The corporation had a non-proclamation bylaw stating whereby no flag will be raised at all. And we had a delegation from Simcoe Ferte come forward in my first term. And as much as I wanted to fully support and raise the flag, I had a responsibility to uphold the municipal bylaws. So I had to vote no. I had to raise my hand and vote absolutely against how I felt personally, but how I needed to vote as an elected official. And then after that, changed the rules and made sure that Springwater does have a proclamation bylaw. And we worked very hard and diligent as a council to put rules in place to ensure that this can happen. So while I fully understand voting on issues that are contentious, that have divisiveness, I think when we sit here, we all vote as what we feel we're elected to do, who we're representing. So I absolutely will be voting, and I'm just really happy that this time it's in line with my personal opinions, because it's not easy to sit here in this seat and take that divide within yourself. So I can completely understand, but I guess at this time, if there's no, Councillor Thompson.
And could I ask for a recorded vote as well?
Yes, sir. And any further comment or question? Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you. I will read the motion as Councillor Thompson has approved the wording. The council hereby supports the Springwater Public Library Drag Storytime event, and a recorded vote was requested. When I state your name, please state yes or no. And as there was the question about abstaining from voting, if you are abstaining from voting, please state that when I call your name. Councillor Garwood.
Yes.
Councillor Alexander.
No.
Councillor Thompson.
Yes.
Councillor Moore.
Yes.
Counselor Fisher,
No.
Deputy Mayor Cabral,
No.
and Mayor Coughlin.
Yes.
That motion is carried.
Thank you. Are there any other topics pertaining to item 3.2 before we, at this point, would resolve? And I do appreciate, and I have seen lots of hands go up and down, and at the will of the chair, the majority of council can overturn it, but I am going to keep the discussion. We've had a discussion, we've had a vote, and while your opinions do count, please send us an email. I don't want to open this up and. So. Thank you. And I do appreciate that. The agenda that was set was not set through the office of the mayor. The agenda that was set was done so in accordance. So we don't, on the agenda, have that. And while I do appreciate you being here, and please don't take this any other way, I am not going to permit audience members from coming forward at this time, because I do feel that the decorum, maybe I'm just not a good enough mayor to keep the decorum to where it needs to be, but I do appreciate you being here. And unless there's any other topic on this, our council will be resolving into closed. May I have a mover and seconder to move into closed session? Deputy Cabral, Councillor Fisher. That in accordance with Section 239 of the Municipal Act 2001, the Corporation of the Township of Springwater does hereby resolve into closed session at 4:26 p.m. for discussion pertaining to a personal matter about an identifiable individual, including municipal and local board employees, labor relations, or employee negotiations. Topics: employment matters with the Springwater Public Library, hiring, economic development assistant, rainbow crosswalk irregularities, sorry. Yes. All those in favor? And that has carried. And we'll just take a few minutes to empty the gallery and we'll resolve into closed.
To recess this meeting.
Yeah. Council, we are now in open session. We have reconvened into open and we will be recessing this meeting to move into our 5 o'clock meeting. Just letting you know that we have recessed the previous